Pickford was not just a movie star, she became the very symbol of early Hollywood. Crowned America's sweetheart, she was one of the first global celebrities, adored by millions who had never even heard her real name. Yet behind the curls and youthful smile that lit up silent screens was a woman whose determination, ambition, and sacrifices helped invent an entire industry. She built an empire where none existed, but in doing so, she gave up parts of herself that no spotlight could restore. How did a girl born into poverty rise to become the most powerful woman in Hollywood? And why did the applause eventually fade into silence? Born Gladys Louise Smith on April 8, 1892, in Toronto, Canada, Mary Pickford grew up in a working-class family of English-Irish heritage. Her father, John Charles Smith, was an alcoholic laborer who abandoned the family early, leaving Mary's mother, Charlotte, to raise 3 children on her own. Poverty shadowed their lives. Mary's earliest memories were shaped by loss, the death of her father when she was just 5 years old, and by the unyielding strength of her mother, who became both caretaker and motivator. Even in childhood, Mary showed signs of fierce determination. She was small with golden curls and a dramatic flair that caught the attention of neighbors and teachers. But what truly shaped her future was her mother's insistence that the stage might be the family's way out of hardship. When a neighbor suggested Mary try out for a local theater role, Charlotte seized the opportunity. At age 7, Mary stepped onto the stage, not just for fun, but for survival. Life on the stage was harsh. Touring theaters across North America meant sleeping in cramped quarters, constant travel, and financial uncertainty. Mary's childhood was spent less in play and more in endless rehearsals, where she quickly learned the rules of performance and discipline. By her teenage years, she had become the breadwinner of her family, carrying the weight of responsibility far beyond her age. In 1909, Mary arrived in New York with only a few dollars and big dreams. She auditioned for theater roles but found herself drawn to a new, experimental industry: motion pictures. At first, she resisted the idea, considering film an inferior form of art. But necessity spoke louder than pride. She signed with the Biograph Company, working under director D.W. Griffith. It was there that Gladys Louise Smith transformed into Mary Pickford, a name suggested for the stage that would soon become iconic. Still, early struggles haunted her. The pay was meager, and she often worried about her family's survival. But the screen loved her. Her expressive eyes, youthful innocence, and natural ability to convey emotion without words made her stand out in the silent film era. Soon, audiences began to recognize her face. The girl from Toronto was on the brink of something extraordinary. Everything changed in 1910. Mary Pickford began appearing in short films at a breathtaking pace, sometimes several a week. The public adored her, and by 1914, she was one of the most recognized faces in America. Her screen persona, the innocent, optimistic, mischievous girl next door, captured the imagination of audiences worldwide. But her true breakthrough came not just from performance, but from power. In 1916, she became the first actress to receive a $1 million contract, an astronomical sum that made headlines across the globe. By then, she had become known as America's Sweetheart, a title that spoke to both her popularity and the emotional bond audiences felt with her. Her rise was meteoric, but it was also revolutionary. For the first time, a woman was not just a performer, but a commanding force in Hollywood. The 1910s and 1920s were Mary Pickford's golden years. She starred in classics like Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm, 1917, Stella Maris, 1918, and Pollyanna, 1920. Each role reinforced her image as the eternal child, though she was already well into adulthood. Audiences wept, laughed, and cheered with her. She became the most famous woman in the world, rivaled only by Charlie Chaplin in cultural influence. But Mary was more than a star. She was a pioneer. In 1919, she co-founded United Artists alongside Charlie Chaplin, D.W. Griffith, and Douglas Fairbanks. Their bold vision was to give artists creative control over their work, a radical move that shaped the future of Hollywood. Mary wasn't just acting, she was producing, writing, and making business decisions in an industry dominated by men. Her achievements were staggering. She won the Academy Award for Best Actress in 1930 for Coquette, one of her first talking films. She was instrumental in shaping film distribution, production standards, and the very concept of celebrity. She redefined what it meant to be not only a film star, but a cultural icon. Yet behind the spotlight, Mary Pickford was not the carefree girl the public adored. Her personal life was a labyrinth of challenges. She married actor Owen Moore in 1911, but the relationship was plagued by his alcoholism and jealousy. Their union crumbled under the weight of her fame. In 1920, she married Douglas Fairbanks, Hollywood's swashbuckling hero. Together, they became the first true celebrity power couple, their home Pickfair becoming a symbol of glamour and success. The world idolized them, but behind closed doors, tensions grew. The pressures of fame, Douglas's infidelities, and Mary's struggle to let go of her youthful image strained their marriage. Mary also wrestled with her own identity. For decades, she had played little girls, even as she grew older. Audiences resisted seeing her as a mature woman, and she felt trapped in the very image that had made her famous. Alcohol became a coping mechanism, and depression followed. The woman adored by millions was privately lonely, isolated by her own legend. As sound films replaced silent cinema, Mary Pickford's reign began to wane. Though she tried to adapt, her voice and mature roles clashed with the youthful persona audiences still demanded. By the early 1930s, she retired from acting, retreating from the public eye. Her marriage to Fairbanks ended in divorce, and though she remarried actor Buddy Rogers in 1937, she never fully regained the joy of her earlier years. In her later decades, she became reclusive, rarely leaving her home. The grand estate of Pickfair, once filled with laughter and famous guests, grew silent. She invested in producing and remained involved in the industry behind the scenes, but physically and emotionally she withdrew. Alcoholism, depression, and fading relevance marked her later years. The applause that once echoed across the world had grown still. Yet Mary Pickford's legacy is indelible. She was not just a performer, she was a builder of Hollywood itself. She proved that women could hold power in business, that actors could demand creative control, and that cinema could create global icons. She helped shape the language of film, inspiring generations of actors and filmmakers. Even today, she remains a symbol of resilience and innovation. Her curls and youthful smile may seem relics of a distant age, but the empire she helped create still stands. United Artists paved the way for artistic freedom. The concept of stardom that she embodied continues to define popular culture. Mary Pickford reminds us that the story of Hollywood is, in many ways, the story of her. As sound films replaced silent cinema, Mary Pickford's reign began to wane. Though she tried to adapt, her voice and mature roles clashed with the youthful persona audiences still demanded. By the early 1930s, she retired from acting, retreating from the public eye. Her final screen appearance came in Secrets, 1933, closing the curtain on one of the most celebrated careers in film history. Her marriage to Fairbanks ended in divorce, and though she remarried actor Buddy Rogers in 1937, she never fully regained the joy of her earlier years. With Rogers, she found steadier companionship, but the glitter of her life's earlier chapter was gone. In her later decades, she became increasingly reclusive, rarely leaving her home. The grand estate of Pickfair, once filled with laughter, parties, and famous guests from Albert Einstein to Charlie Chaplin, grew eerily silent. Though she withdrew from acting, Mary remained active behind the scenes. She invested in producing, supported young talent, and helped establish the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Yet personally, she struggled with alcoholism and bouts of depression. The pressure of living up to her legendary status weighed heavily, and as Hollywood shifted into new eras, she felt both out of place and forgotten. The rise of new stars in the 1940s and 1950s made Mary Pickford seem like a relic of another age. Unlike Chaplin, who reinvented himself, or Fairbanks, who remained tied to swashbuckling legend, Mary's image was forever bound to innocence and youth, an identity impossible to maintain as time marched on. Attempts at charitable and professional ventures kept her engaged, but physically and emotionally, she withdrew further. By the 1960s, she was almost completely absent from public life. In her final years, Mary rarely granted interviews, speaking only to a few close friends and her husband, Buddy Rogers. Visitors described her as fragile but still sharp, sometimes reminiscing about the golden days of Hollywood with a wistful mix of pride and sorrow. She lived long enough to see the world rediscover silent films and honor her legacy, but she remained haunted by the distance between the adoration she once knew and the obscurity of her later life. Yet Mary Pickford's legacy is indelible. She was not just a performer, she was a builder of Hollywood itself. She proved that women could hold power in business, that actors could demand creative control, and that cinema could create global icons. She helped shape the language of film, inspiring generations of actors and filmmakers. Even today, she remains a symbol of resilience and innovation. Her curls and youthful smile may seem relics of a distant age, but the empire she helped create still stands. United Artists paved the way for artistic freedom. The concept of stardom that she embodied continues to define popular culture. Mary Pickford reminds us that the story of Hollywood is, in many ways, the story of her. Mary Pickford's story is not just one of success, but of transformation, of a poor Canadian girl who became the face of an industry, of a woman who challenged the limits of her time, and of a legend who lived long enough to see her own era fade into memory. Her life reflects the paradox of fame, that it can both elevate and imprison, but her name endures, carved into the foundation of cinema itself. A reminder that even legends are, in the end, human, and that sometimes the greatest role one can play is not on screen, but in shaping the world behind it.